Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/KYHistoryPod. Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and I'm here with David Kirkpatrick, and we're going to wrap up Benjamin Logan.
Sounds good.
Finally. I think this will be our 5th episode covering Benjamin Logan, but I've enjoyed it. I am a big Benjamin Logan fan, so the more the merrier.
Absolutely. And he had a lot going on. There's a lot of material to cover.
That's true. Again, I don't think I mentioned it in the last episode, but this I read the book by Charles Talbot, which is basically the only biography about Benjamin Logan that's out there. It's a very good biography, and actually, if I was recommending it, it's a very good story of Kentucky's early history. I mean, a lot of stuff going on, and very well done. So you get a double, not only Benjamin Logan's life, you also get a bit more about Kentucky's early history and the establishment of the state and so forth. And that's the point we're at here. We've talked about everything leading up to this, and we're finally getting to that point where Kentucky is going to become a state. And again, the big issue with one of the big issues we talked about, the location of the capital, Native Americans attacks, and not being able to retaliate, and having to go through the bureaucracy of a government that's really not interested in what's going on in the District of Kentucky at the time. But the other factor of this is the economic independence. Kentucky needs to be able to function by itself. We talked about in the last episode about how tobacco was the currency for Virginia. Well, Kentucky is going to need to have its own currency. Now, maybe it's tobacco or whatever, but those kind of issues were also kind of important as well. But in December of 1789, Virginia gave the 4th Enabling Act, and the Kentuckians agreed upon the terms, which were more in favor of Kentucky. And those kind of things were the control of the Mississippi. Some of those things were kind of big issues that Kentucky wanted to be able to handle itself. And pretty much on June 1st, 1792, Kentucky would separate from Virginia. And that was the plan, and they stick to it. During this time, there were some expeditions into Ohio, but most of these were led by Charles Scott, which is a future governor of Kentucky. And Logan and Shelby are mentioned, but not in a leadership capacity. It's kind of said that if they were needed, or they would be able to rally all of Kentucky if they needed. If you get Shelby and Logan, everybody's going to say, "Okay, let's go, let's ride, let's go do this." Right. During this time, it was kind of becoming safe to assume that Logan was a bit more focused on his family and his job as county lieutenant, which changing in his life to say the least.
Oh, absolutely. He's grown. He's become more prosperous. His family's grown. I think when we talked last week, he had 4 children. By this point in his life, he has 8, and he's got 5 boys. He's got 3 daughters. His oldest son is now 17. His brothers, Hugh, John, William, and Nathaniel, and their mother, Jane, are all still living in Lincoln County. And he, like any good father, loves spending time with his family and participating in a good dance. Now, I will say that last part does not apply to all fathers. I'm not a dancer. But he's enjoying the many years it took to create a settlement and a life there.
Mhm.
He owns 2,300 acres, so that's certainly a mark of success. He ends up being baptized as a Presbyterian, so there are churches now and other bits of society that were developing in Kentucky, and he didn't really attend church regular, according to his descendants, but he was belonging to that. He was part of that community. Um, if the people of Lincoln County were voting, Logan was guaranteed a victory. I mean, talk about an easy campaign. All you have to do is not
Mhm.
say you won't do it. So he ends up getting elected to the 10th Kentucky Convention to iron out some details, which is held in December of 1791. So they're in the home stretch. They're 6 months out, and Logan is still helping lead the charge.
Yeah, and just that's we talked about this before. His stages in his life. We're moving into that statehood stage where Logan kind of switches over from being this frontiersman, this military leader, to being this statesman. So during this convention, the 10th convention, a constitution has been created, and some of the convention make some attempts to remove Article 9. And this is something we talked about a long time ago in some old episodes. Um, and Article 9 was the protection of slavery. Um, and they wanted to remove that. Some of them did. But it did not pass. Benjamin Logan voted in favor of Article 9. And, you know, his papers at the time showed that he owned 8 slaves. And we talked about this in the other episode, that he um, felt that a slave owner should have the right to free his own slaves at his whenever he wanted to. Um, but an interesting thing, I won't get too much more into that because it was a pretty close vote. Like if it was like maybe 16 to 24 or something like that.
Yeah,
If like 5 people would have changed their votes, you're talking about a completely different landscape of the whole nation. Not only
absolutely.
would it would be a free state amongst all these other non-free states. And this would have been at 1792. Way before 1860 when things really hit the fan. You know,
Absolutely.
um, but just an interesting tidbit. We can get into the whole Constitution at a later time. But just that's where Logan was at in the whole situation. Logan was a bit of a moderate though, and seemed to help guide the two opposing sides to common ground. Um, he, kind of being the middleman and kind of working towards a resolution. A lot like Shelby. Isaac Shelby, a bit more. Let's get to the center and let's get this done. Whatever we need to get done. Um, Benjamin Logan was elected to be an elector, and he and his other electors all elected Isaac Shelby to be the first governor of Kentucky. Um, Kentucky's first General Assembly was then held in Lexington on June 4th of 1792. Isaac Shelby appointed Logan as the Major General of the First Division. So pretty much, I don't know for sure about all my military ranks, but that's pretty much top dog, I believe, right?
Oh
Major
yeah.
General is top. Um,
Yeah, each county is going to have a colonel over a regiment, and so for Logan to be a general over a division, he's commanding several counties worth of militia. So that's a big deal.
mhm. Yep. Logan was then elected as a representative for Lincoln County in August, and in the second session of the first General Assembly, Logan County was formed and was named after Benjamin Logan. Um, Shelby also appointed Logan to be one of the 4 presidential electors. So you can see his standing. I mean, the governor of Kentucky, the first governor of Kentucky, is pretty much giving him jobs left and right and giving him honors. So it's safe to say that he was definitely one of the founders of Kentucky.
Oh, absolutely. And even today, it's a great honor to be presidential elector. In the electoral college is what that's referring to, and for Logan to be trusted with that, like you said, he definitely has the faith of all his fellow Kentuckians. Because if that process doesn't have some kind of integrity to it, the Constitution is still very much an experiment. So Shelby picked those electors very carefully, and Logan was a good choice. And you talked about him being a moderate, which is one reason Shelby may have favored him. On the issue of slavery, Yes, he votes in favor of Article 9, but he was also on a committee that drafted a bill that would stop the further importation of slaves into the state. The bill doesn't end up reaching its third reading, just before passage. But the fact that Logan had been a part of that committee that had advanced that really spoke to the fact that they were seeking that middle ground.
Mm.
Uh, he fights for a judge's pay to be $1,000 a year, but the legislator kind of tinkers with it some. It gets reduced to $300 a year, so it's a 70% reduction. That's pretty hard. Uh, he, he had good
Hey,
reason for what he did.
you got to shoot high. You got to shoot high, right?
Right. He's quoted as saying a judge should be a gentleman, and a few men could be found who would agree to behave themselves like a gentleman for $300 a year. And he's not wrong. I mean, that's a valuable point. But again, Logan is got an eye towards the future, and he wants the judgeship in Kentucky and the judicial system to be respected. So uh, he ends up being a representative in the Kentucky House of Representatives. He was unsuccessful in his campaign to be governor in 1796 and 1800, which is surprising. Uh, Maybe the only electoral attempts that he was not successful with. But Logan still continues to play a heavy part in Kentucky history, and it's at a good time because Kentucky's going through some troubles. And like you said, we've gone into this in depth in other videos, but we have the whole Spanish problem where the Spanish conspiracy, where Kentucky is contemplating joining the Spanish Empire in order to have navigational rights on the Mississippi River. And this, I think it's hard to overestimate what a big threat this was because there were some very powerful men in the state who are pushing for that, for Kentucky to break off the Union altogether before statehood happens and really push forward with this.
I was gonna say so, so these are some things that I guess are kind of to think about. The Some southern tribes. So there's a whole nother rumor that the natives are going to attack. Logan begins to you know get the militia ready to go, but it turns out that um, the Indian agent then like informs Logan that they're not hostile, and this big party's kind of it all becomes a bunch of rumors and nothing really happens and it's basically the Chickamauga, I believe, are a sect of the Cherokee,
That's right.
and it comes with some of that issues and that sort of thing. Um, and another issue that they're trying to fix is the Wilderness Road is still not passable in the sense that we can bring wagon loads of people just and horses and supplies. It's still a bit hard to manage. So a whole getting that road manageable is a big issue that they want to do, and that kind of becomes the state's issue once Kentucky is formed. Um, but moving on to the kind of the next few years of Logan's life, he lived in and around his original settlement in Kentucky for almost 20 some years. Um, Logan at the time had 5 sons and 4 daughters, 9 total children, and they had 14 slaves. Shelby had bought Logan had bought 2,400 acres in Shelby County on Bullskin Creek, and now Shelby County had just been formed as well, named after Isaac Shelby. And on March of 1795, he moves his whole family there. So kind of a big step that he moves, from where he's been, where he's established a community, where, like we said before, it's basically he's the top dog. Um, but on May 5th, the people of Shelby County elect him to represent them in the Kentucky General Assembly. So his name is carrying weight more than just in his local area or his local county. In 1796, he announces his candidacy for governor, and this kind of could be one of the reasons he moved. At the time, the Kentucky governor was elected by electors, and the
Right.
electors were elected by the people. So there was no rule against the governor being reelected for another term, like it was for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, Logan thought that if maybe he lived in another county, then it would be more likely he could be selected. And the Kentucky electors would be less likely to elect someone from Lincoln County again. So,
Right.
thinking Isaac Shelby was from Lincoln County, he thought maybe if I'm in another county, they'll be more likely to elect me since I'm not from Lincoln County. And I guess there's some merit to that. I mean, there's some good
Makes
thought
sense.
process, but you know, um, anyway, that's kind of maybe what his thinking was, and it does make some sense. But Logan was a Republican for what that meant, because all the candidates were Republicans.
Right.
uh, James Garrett and Thomas Todd were his two challengers, and the race was off. I guess that's basically what it was. There's two big issues that Logan had. Um, Logan was a pioneer, and he kind of was up against the more educated Garrett and Todd, so that was kind of one issue.
Right.
Um, and the other part was that all the pioneer times, all those people were kind of dying and going. I mean, you think Herod was gone, Boone's not as prominent. All those people are kind of gone in this time of heroic deeds and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of moving away. And if you think this is 1796, it's almost 20 years removed from when they all settled there, when all
That's
that
right.
stuff was going on. So that popularity of being a military leader, doing all that kind of stuff, is not as in the forefront of everybody's head. We're a state now. There's
Right.
not been a Native American attacks for as much. So Logan was popular. His name was popular, but he was just different. I guess he was
Yeah.
different from the other two candidates. Both of them were wealthy, but not. Well, I should say all three of them were wealthy, but not in the same manner. Garrett had 38,000 acres. Benjamin Logan had 6,000 acres. Now, that's a lot of land for either one, but
Right.
one is a lot, even more. So those are kind of the differences. I mean, not to say Benjamin Logan wasn't a high society man, but he probably wasn't as much as say Garrett. And I don't know if we mentioned Garrett was kind of from in Bourbon County, owned a lot of land there,
Right.
and Garrett also came from some notoriety in Virginia. His family had some standing there as well, so a bit different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And like you said, things are changing so rapidly, and all the candidates, in some ways, are very similar in terms of their policies. Because, as you said, they're all Republicans or Democratic Republicans, as it was called back then. The
Mhm.
other party, are the Federalists, and there are
Yeah.
not many of them in Kentucky. So they all share a lot of the same sentiments, but uh, things were changing, and that authority that Logan wielded had shifted some. And I think that's one reason as you said, he moves northward, is because the political power is shifting to Louisville and Lexington, and it's moving
Yeah.
away from places like Harrodsburg and St. Asaph's and those areas. But so much was in flux. Campaigning was different. Logan had to actually go out and campaign, and at one point he's on his way to Mount Sterling, and the story goes he ends up having to fix a wagon wheel, and he does it himself, and of course ruins his shirt. And he continues to go ahead and give his speech, but he keeps his coat buttoned all the way up to the top so he can look like he's pressed and clean. And it's more resembling what we think of when it comes to politics. And
Mhm.
but the first vote for governor follows, and it's Logan 21, Garrett 16, and Todd 14. However,
Okay.
this what's that?
So Logan's the second governor, right?
Yeah, you would think. However,
Yeah.
the assembly decides the candidate needed to receive a majority vote. This wasn't the law, by any stretch, and so really Logan should have been governor, but in the second ballot, so many of those votes shift to Garrett that he ends up with a majority vote. And it was rumored that Garrett and Todd's supporters had kind of cut a deal. And, this unfortunately seems to never ever go away in Kentucky history, because if you recall,
Mhm.
several decades later, Henry Clay is accused of doing the same thing. what's called the
Yep.
corrupt bargain. So, but whatever happened, the votes shift, and Logan has victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. And he really feels like he's been wronged at this point, and rightfully so. He contests the election, saying the assembly didn't have the authority for that second vote, and he's kind of right, but he does not prevail.
Yeah, yeah, and even the Kentucky Attorney General said Logan should have been declared governor. There's a whole bunch of political back and forth, newspaper writings and all that kind of stuff. And it's basically you got the conservative planners of the bluegrass versus the liberal Democratic small farmers of Green River. And if you're looking at Green River, it's that mid to southern part of the state,
Right.
which was what Logan kind of is closer to, or was. I should say that because being in Shelby County, you would kind of he would be more of the bluegrass. But when the Senate met, a political battle begins, and it did not end favorably for Logan. Uh, Garrett had already been in office for 5 months by the time this stuff happened. Um, and Logan pretty much leaves Frankfurt disappointed. Like he kind of fights to the point that he can, and then there's nothing else he can do. But again, that shows the time. To think that it would be 5 months later when you have a contested election in this sense, it would be completely different. It would be hard to remove the people that had already been appointed to these offices or whatever. And in reality, I would say Logan was done wrong. He rightfully so.
Oh, yeah.
It's justifiable. Or his disappointment is obviously justifiable. He does remain in politics, and he was reelected to represent Shelby County. And he was elected again for representing Shelby County, but then he was also elected for the second constitutional convention. So here we are, still getting the government rolling.
Right.
Logan did not become the governor, but his family's influence had also kind of grown. William Logan, Benjamin's oldest son, he fought hard for the election of the governor to be put into a popular vote. Because if you think about that, you put somebody in a popular vote, maybe Logan's outcome changes. Um,
It's
Logan then, of course, puts his name in for the governor again in 1800, which would be the first popular election for governor. He again would be running against Garrett, and at this time could be reelected. Thomas Todd again, and then a newcomer, Christopher Greenup. His main qualities were his native campaign, being the first settler of Kentucky, and his political career.
right.
Logan was very popular in 1796, but all these qualities were less important then than they were when they first happened, and now they're even less important. In 1800, he was not as popular. He was not as well known. He probably could have been. He probably could have been seen as a sort of loser because he didn't because he contested the first election, which he rightfully should have contested.
Oh, yeah.
But that could have waned on his political popularity, or political opinion could have changed on him. So again,
Yeah, that's certainly true. And yeah, I think so many new people had come into the state that they had not been there for the years when he had provided so much leadership for Kentucky. And but like you say, you would think he would always have a better chance now, because when you talk about the convention, for folks who don't know, Kentucky's had 4 state constitutions. So they get that first one in 1792, which took the 10 conventions to get to. Less than a decade later, they're passing a brand new constitution. And that's what we're talking about here. And Logan, you would think, would have carried farther forward, but he's kind of past his heyday. And when they end up tallying the votes, Garrett has won re-election with almost 8,400. Greenup has a little over 6,700, and Logan has 3,995, with Todd finishing fourth. So he doesn't come in last, but he is far and away in third place. Um, this kind of, he took it as a sign of the end, I guess, in a sense, because Logan would not run for public office again. He would tend to his family that was still growing, with his children getting married now, and he continued to buy and sell land. And on December 11th of 1802, he was 60 years old and attending a sale at a home of a man named Owen. And while he's there, he stayed for supper. And in the middle of eating at the table, he suffers apoplexy and ends up dying pretty instantly and somewhat unexpectedly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you think about, I mean, it doesn't sound, 60 years old at that time is a pretty solid life.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
but I guess when you think about somebody's health, he wasn't showing any signs of any kind of sickness, and it just kind of happens.
Right.
Um, and again, I'm pretty confident he probably wouldn't have ran for governor again. He seemed to be, done with politics. But as the old saying goes, I don't know what the old saying I was going to say, but it's very easy for somebody like, I'm done now, and then a year later, back, I'm ready to get back in. I've rested enough. I'm ready to throw my hat back in. So, um, and again, maybe he would have become the third governor of Kentucky. It's hard to say with hindsight. Obviously, Greenup had won more of the vote in the 1800 election, and Greenup ends up being the third governor of Kentucky. So to say that maybe Logan could have came in there and um, lifted, had enough votes, I don't know. Maybe so. Who knows? You can't really tell. Um, but he could have possibly ran for governor. He definitely should have technically become governor in 1796.
Right.
So yeah, that's the fun of history, looking back at the what ifs and all that kind of stuff. But overall, a very productive life. Final thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, the fact that he's run for office so many times and seeking the governorship at the age he was when he did speaks again to a life of service. I mean, you have everything you need at this point. You have thousands of acres. You have land that's secure and well cultivated. You're well known and well liked by everyone. You've got a growing family. And yet, Logan continues up until the last few years of his life, really to seek public office and do good things. And that includes putting himself in harm's way time and time again. Includes holding a number of jobs that took him away from his family, but he was willing to do it.
Hmm. Yeah, and as far as my thoughts, it's definitely living close to Fort Logan and Stanford, well, pretty much my entire life. Definitely a big historical figure for me. But again, like one of those people in Kentucky's history that is not well known, but had
Right.
his hand in all of it, from
Absolutely.
settlement to becoming a state. And we talk about, or we talked about Boone and Herod, you know, bringing over the first forts and establishing those first forts. But 1792, Herod dies. You know,
Yes.
Boone's good and done with Kentucky. Um, so Logan was one that stuck around. Out of those first three, he stuck around and helped establish the state. Um, and you think about the whole election thing. It he fought. I mean, he had every right to fight for the contested election, because there was no law saying that there needed to be a majority vote. It
Right.
definitely looks shady that there was other people wanting Garrett or Todd. Probably Garrett was the main one they wanted to get in there, and it probably was because um, Garrett had more influence. Garrett had more backing, more of a formal politician look to him, um,
Right.
to say the least. But overall, a very good um, frontiersman of Kentucky, founder of Kentucky, to say that.
I think the best way to describe Logan is that from certainly by 1780 up to 1802, over that 22-year period, you can go anywhere you want in Kentucky and mention his name, and they will know who he is. And I think they would be surprised today that so few people do know the name because he was so influential in state history.
Yep, I agree. Um, well, I think that's good. We can wrap this up on old Benjamin Logan. Finally, maybe one day we'll go back and bring him back up again.
Oh, absolutely.
If you've listened to all 5 episodes, you should be an expert now at Benjamin Logan. Um, I got nothing else to add. There is. Well, I will plug this. Go read the biography if you're interested. Again, you could listen to episodes and probably get just as much the basics out of it. But also in May, it's usually the third week of May, the third weekend of May, around the 19th, 20th, 21st. They do have the siege of Fort Logan every year at there at the fort they're rebuilding, which is it's about 2/3 done. So hopefully it will be done soon. But it's a good reenactment to go check out if that's something you're interested in doing, and you can check out the history we've been talking about here. So anything else?
I think that sums it up well.
All right. Well, we will thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We're always seeking to find more Kentucky history so we can bring it to you. The viewers, the listeners, we want all the stories and all the events from Kentucky's great history to be told and shared everywhere.